our Director of Cloud Services, and Karsten Du, who is a managing architect on our Azure team. And welcome, gentlemen. We appreciate you sharing your depth of understanding and expertise today. So I'm going to hand it off to you, Jason, to walk us through the agenda and get started.
Great. Thanks, Keith. So there have been a number of advances from Microsoft in terms of Copilot, Azure AI services, uh, things that you can do in Power Apps and so on. So we wanted to take today a few minutes to explain where uh, customers who are in the GCC high space or Azure government environments, where some of those technologies, even though Copilot may not be available quite yet, what you could take advantage of to begin and start to leverage tools for your AI use cases. So we want to be able to talk through what that journey looks like, the readiness and deployment overview. We are going to conduct a demo of Azure OpenAI and to kind of provide a scenario of what does setting up those services in Azure look like, and then what is the end user experience to be able to explore and evaluate the AI use cases as well. And then we'll talk through a methodology that Planet has built out that customers can leverage, whether you know of use cases that you have or you're still at the beginning of trying to determine, we have a number of business ideas and thoughts, and how can we leverage those and utilize Azure or AI services to be able to execute on those use cases. And then, of course, at any time, if there's questions or discussion, we can save it for the end, or feel free to add to the chat. So, understanding the Azure AI universe from Microsoft, they have been expanding their portfolio and their technology sets to interact with every capability they have today. And what we wanted to share today is to really understand the nuances between Copilot and Azure AI services. And while Copilot is the center for Microsoft's AI enablement strategy, products are released, they are available through third-party tools. There's thousands of use cases that could potentially require leveraging Azure OpenAI services. And so understanding those technologies, things within vision or speech or language or documents. And really, today's presentation is going to focus on leveraging Azure AI services. And it's a collection of 50 different services, whether it's large language models, machine learning models, components that Microsoft's pre-built, but also giving you the tools to create your own as well. And it's important to note, whereas Copilot has that fixed monthly cost, Azure is a consumption model. So you're billed for what you're using and consuming today. As we had talked about, here's a brief example of those different services that are available. So whether you're leveraging one of the OpenAI services through the GPT models, but there's also components that Microsoft has released separately to be able to support, whatever use case you're trying to do, whether it's vision, leveraging their bot framework services that you can then deploy through Teams or through custom applications, anomaly detectors, content moderators, translators. There's a distinct set of services where if you're really trying to solve a specific problem, you can leverage those unique services or combine them to support an overall process. But in many cases, what we found with customers, it's how do I determine which technology set I should use to support which use case? And so we have tried to articulate a decision logic matrix around here's the scenarios in which a specific tool could be best used depending on the scenario you're trying to solve for. So a decision tree for AI tools to help determine the appropriate AI tool that really considers your specific need and objectives. We'll cover the Copilot, Azure AI Studio, and Copilot Studio through this. And some of the focus areas are really around personal productivity versus, departmental or, organizational wide automation, and functionality. So from a decision tree, right, the first question's asked, do you need an AI-driven assistance for personal productivity within Microsoft 365 applications like Word, Excel, right? The general recommendation is Copilot solves that problem. But for organizations that have driven or have been down the path of deploying GCCH because of their compliance requirements through the contracts and the flow down for CUI and other scenarios, it's not available, and that time frame is still unknown. But you still want to have some of those capabilities that are available, so it would really lead to: do you require a platform for developing and deploying OpenA models for business functionality automation? And today, is really we're going to focus around Azure AI Studio and those capability sets. So if we're going to say, yes, this is something that we're going to show, and here's what you can leverage. But there's a third scenario that's also available, is if you're looking for an AI tool set that integrates with Microsoft applications and services that can serve both. Well, Copilot Studio is really around the Power Platform that Microsoft has made available, where you can introduce, individual bots or agents, really is the new terminology today, but also to be able to leverage it within applications to streamline or find those, business processes. So from a summary, automating tasks within apps, drafting emails, summarizing meetings, or analyzing trends, or Azure AI Studios to create those services for new language models, chatbots, data managed in Azure, on premises, or in third-party public clouds, such as training an existing natural language model for regulatory compliance checks, Azure data, or third-party systems. There's a methodology from which you can upload data into those environments and then leverage Azure AI Studio for the chat interface, or the model to be able to investigate or explore your data through those tools. Or if you want to embed AI into applications or workflows, Copilot Studio is available within that. So, and we'll make this presentation, of course, available at the end. But your decision tree is, again, what do I need for productivity, business automation? Do I use the machine learning or Azure AI Foundry or Copilot Studio? It really drives through those decisions to help you understand at a high level, where do I start, and then how do I evaluate and test? In most cases, understanding the impact and the potential where AI can impact your business, we've seen it in a number of cases transform industries by enabling smarter decisions or automating processes, some of those low value activities that folks have to do to be able to complete their job or to drive towards an outcome. But the biggest hurdle that we've seen outside of not having the tool set available is really driving towards the business use cases and understanding the business use case and focusing on the data and just not the technology for what you want to drive. And it's really around understanding what is the outcome we are expecting this AI initiative will drive and support for us. Really, AI is another tool for your toolbox to help address some of those specific business challenges. And your steps to get started is really, again, defining that use case and then evaluating the desirability, the viability, and the feasibility of implementing that use case. So if you haven't seen or noticed the theme, it's use cases, right? What are we trying to solve? How are we trying to drive it? So your objective when evaluating use cases is understanding the data impacts and what are the productivity and ROI potential. You're going to ideate for potential, not possibility, right? What are the 30 different ideas that folks have that could potentially see significant impact of AI within those business processes or those data sets that you have? You can always evaluate for possibility after your ideation session, because that's after this step, you really start to get to the point of how do you experiment on that data, right? Because not all use cases are going to work, but you're going to drive through that through your experimentation model. And when you start thinking about your use cases, they generally fall into two scenarios. AI has become such a very broad term for driving automation within the organization. What we have seen many organizations and places start to think through it as is breaking it down into predictive versus generative. So predictive allows you to use historical data to predict future outcomes, such as demand forecasting, customer churn, risk assessment. What shows us that potential? A couple of years ago, I worked in an industry where we were trying to predict student success across multiple different factors, right? And so that then we could take these new students when they went to register for classes and then guide them through choosing classes based on the historical set of that data. Same thing within the DIB or other organizations. How can we take historical data to find new information or new trends or take people through a guided process? The other scenario is generative AI, which is really what you're seeing within Copilot and in agents or bots that you may be interacting with today that you see on websites, right? It takes creates new content based on existing data, things from text or images or music composition. So as you start to think through the use cases that you've gone through, then you add that next lens of, okay, is this a predictive or is this a generative AI use case? So with that, to really talk through and kind of give a perspective of how the application is used, I'll turn it over to Karsten, who will show what this potentially looks like or will look like in Azure, and then we'll do an end user demo as well. So Karsten.
Thank you, Jason. I'll share my screen here. So welcome everyone. I think it's important to pull into what I'm about to demo here, what Jason said about use cases. There are some general thoughts about what AI is, but there are some other considerations, of course, around AI and how we use it, and particularly the data we are using. So what we're going to look at here, in Azure, we have enabled an AI model that is built on Azure OpenAI. And one of the reasons, or some of the reasons rather, for using a model like this in your own Azure environment is, of course, around data privacy and compliance, where I can, when I go to Azure Government, this environment happens to be commercial, but I can build the same in Azure Government, and I can take on compliance data sets, such as HIPAA or CGIS and even CUI. And I can govern this the way I govern my data in Azure. We get hands-on control over security controls. And of course, we can customize what we use, how we use it, and how we interact with the data. This is also scalable. We're not going to call it endlessly scalable, but it's highly scalable. And you get the ability of integrating this with other workloads, other data sets, you name it. So whatever you have in Azure, there is integration paths for most of that with the AI interface or tool set. And then, of course, when this is running in Azure, I assume you know a little bit about governance and management in Azure. We get full control. We have control over, the resource group that this lives in, the subscription it lives in, management groups. We can run this in any compliance framework that is supported by Microsoft. So those are some of the other impacts to the use cases that Jason was talking about. So what we're looking at here is a resource group. We called it Private GPT for fun. This is really can also call it a private Copilot, of course. It's built on Azure OpenAI. It's also built on the Azure AI search service. And it's deployed through the Azure AI Foundry, which used to be the AI Studio. It's renamed. And in here, what we've done, we have gone into to create a chat. So we create a deployment to use as a chat interface. Not to go too deep in the matter here, I just want to show you one little thing here. This is of course just an insight in what we can do with data, right? So I can integrate with AI search that can be pointing to or reading from whatever data set that you give it access to. Some of the other method for storing data. Or of course, the last one here that is actually what we did for this demo setup. We took a set of files and we uploaded it into the chat playground, which is called here in the AI Foundry. Out of the box, I can also take a look at how this is actually performing. And this is great for testing for performance and whatnot. And jumping back here to just show you what one of the components we have used to make this work. We're running the chat in a container app. You can think about this as a web app as well. And the result of putting this together, which by the way is a fairly quick deployment, is a chat interface that Keith is going to take you into. Thank you.
Thanks, Karsten. Yeah, so I'm the end user now that's going to show the application. So now that that's up. So yeah, this is a simple, looks a lot like anything else you've worked with, a bot, or if you're used ChatGPT, etc. So this is a simple little application, and we're going to walk through kind of the end user experience, right? Your ability to prompt and interact with the data that's in your model, and we'll talk about that. So for now, I'll click on one of these, like, hey, what happens in a performance review? It's going to generate an answer based on the information that we've uploaded into the various parts of this application, the storage, and that it's indexed. So it's using the large language model to understand the question that I'm inferring and needing an answer to, and then it's using the data to provide that response. So I'm going to clear this real quick and take the approach of, I just started at my company. My company has made this application available to me for understanding what benefits are available to me. So I'm going to ask some simple questions, and for brevity, instead of watching me type, I'm going to just copy paste a few questions into the chat. So I want to know about health plans for me and my family of 4. So you can see it's going to go look at the data that it has access to, generate a very simple answer. And it's also going to give me a reference here so I can see where this is coming from in my company's HR data that's part of this application now. So, okay, that's interesting. We have 2 health plans. We have Northwind Health Plus and Standard, and I would like to understand the differences between those 2. So that's my next question. I feel like, this would be better seen as maybe a table as opposed to text and bullets, because I'm a little bit visual. So I'm going to say, thank you. Please make a table from that, right? Please create a table and list the differences in the table for each plan. So from that, so it's prompt chaining, right? So it's keeping an understanding of where I'm going with all of my questions. So now you can see, we have a nice formatted table. We can see the various coverages available between the plans, what's covered with the Health Plus program or the Standard program. And now I want to know something like, hey, what is the deductible cost for each plan? Because I kind of like the Plus plan, if I'm being honest, but I'm not sure how much it costs. So next question is very simple, right? So we can go through and start to get information between the two. So you can see that this is coming out. And now I can ask a question that's a little bit more, general, like, oh, hey, I'm trying to decide if the Health Plus plan is worth the extra cost. I'm almost asking your opinion, but I'm going to do it in the sense of a price difference, just to demonstrate a point here. Notice that it wasn't really, this isn't giving me a lot of opinion based, and I think that's on purpose, right? Because this is scoped to my data, right? And so, and it's also some settings that we'll show you here in just a minute from the developer side. And I want to list this in a little bit different, so I'm going to ask a different question now, or I'm going to different instructions to put this in a table. This is a little easier for me to understand and start to make decisions. But I bring this up in the sense of, notice I want to have it give me its opinion, which is a little bit of creativity. So if we were to look here now, when you deploy this to end users, you probably wouldn't make this available to do this, but you have a number of settings as you're building your application and testing how it's responding and making sure it's behaving in a way that's aligned to your standards or needs. There's this thing, and you can go through all these, but for instance, temperature, if I click on the information button here, this tells me that the higher the temperature, the more creative the response will be. So if you've heard of the term things like hallucinating or just making things up, right? You can allow it to be more creative, which would change the way it would answer. Hey, I want to understand if this is worth it. Which plan should I choose? So there's a bunch of things in here that you can do. The other thing at the bottom, which is kind of interesting, is you can suggest follow-up questions. So the large language model will look at the questions that your user or I'm asking in this case. And so if I turn that on and say close, I'm going to clear my chat and let's do this. So we'll just do this and say, okay, well, here's what a performance review does. And notice at the bottom now, it's giving me as a user how often are performance reviews conducted as a potential question I could follow up. So it's helping me maybe think of a next question that I could ask. Now, something else interesting, and this is where it's really applicable, and we've been hinting around this. Why are we talking about this in terms of GCC high environments, which have strict data compliance, or air-gapped environments, as you know, and Azure government? We're doing that because A, you can't get Copilot today there, and B, if you want to introduce generative AI, you've got to meet some real, as we talked about prior, some stringent requirements based on the standards you're trying to meet. So I could say something like, who won the last Super Bowl? Notice it doesn't know because that's not contained within the data. So I'm demonstrating that you can make the boundary whatever you need the boundary to be. You can allow this to be as creative or as structured and accurate as you need based on your application requirements. And that's important to know, that the boundary of its ability to ingest data and create a response or generate a response from a prompt is going to be literally ring fenced by the data that you put in your application, and it's allowed to ingest and index and create responses from. So you don't have to worry about potential information oversharing or too much erroneous information unless you build it that way on purpose. But as far as being able to have connection to the outside world and combine those results with Bing search or internet data, you can do that. That is something that you can add in. But if the application is, hey, how do I give end users a resource that can understand questions that are phrased in a way that may not be how normal chatbots would respond, but still generate and find the accurate information for them, this is how you would do that. So Jason, Karsten, that was my end user, or we could take questions if we need to now, but I'll hand it back over to you, Jason.
Great, thanks, Keith. So let me go back. All right. we've noticed there's been a few questions. I believe Karsten's been answering them, and we'll continue to track and follow that. So, as our demo showed, there was a number of steps of how we went through in that process. From we came up with a use case, and in this example, right, it was, how do we make sure our health plan information is made aware to people in general, so they can continue to ask for it. So we curated that data, and we added it and created our Azure AI workspace, which is the tools and the services that Karsten walked through and showed. Then we configured in Azure AI Studio some of the prompt engineering, which is where Keith kind of highlighted how you can increase or lower the temperature, how you can gatekeep the data itself so it can't answer extraneous questions. We walked through the data cleansing and how you can infer or run the RAG process against the data, and then how we validated the results and how we displayed the source of that information, because that really helps build the trust and the confidence with the users that the system is actually responding to what exists and it's not hallucinating to a fault, and you can be confident in the results. So when customers that we've talked to have said, we're interested in Azure AI, we think we've got our use cases, how long does it take? What's the process? And so really where we've taken, customers through and is this process around, we want to enable an Azure workspace to experiment and validate our AI concepts. And we walk through the data curation and the AI services implementation, through the prompt engineering and AI model inferencing. And then post-experiment, did this work? And we can deploy a pilot in which we could add additional capabilities and start rolling it out to our users. In most cases, right, the use case identification and the data curation, takes a couple of weeks. Running through the AI experimentation process, can take up to another 3 to 4 weeks after that, and then you can launch into a pilot. And you want to think about that through every use case that you want to run, because you want to make sure you can prove that it's going to work. And that really walks through is, it may be desirable, but is it feasible? And so this process is a pretty solid methodology. And so what we have done is, as we continue to educate and help customers understand what that methodology looks like, we've actually offering an AI envisioning session, which is a no-cost workshop that's available as part of your You Already Own It benefits. It's a 90-minute meeting with our OCM team, who walks you through a very concrete process of envisioning AI use cases. So they're high impact, actionable. We complete a feasibility and viability assessment of those use cases. We send you a document of all of the scenarios, the services that you would want to run or utilize, a business case, a plan for implementations based on the prioritization, and define next steps and timelines. That's all part of your You Already Own It benefits. And if your teams are capable, you can jump in and run through those through the AI exploratory and POC to get to the pilot and productionize. But that is a process that's available to you today. In our envisioning session, again, part of your Already Own It benefits, to identify those high impact, actionable initiatives that align with your goals and operational needs. So we lead it. We discuss the use cases. We provide a use case and high level roadmap, which is detailed documentation identifying the use case, the breakdown of each use case with a win statement, a description, the benefits and metrics, executive frequently asked questions about the use case itself, recommended Azure services to be able to implement and deploy, your potential data sources that you have to consider, your project considerations internally, what the next actions would look like, and a business impact statement, which is the qualitative and quantitative results. What's interesting about this process is our OCM team has actually built their own little open AI model that takes the recording of that call and runs through and builds out 70 to 80% of this information. So I think that's why we turn these around so quick, is that we're leveraging AI based off the model that we implemented within it to be able to provide this output to you in a timely manner. All AI use case assessment recommendation. So our team will conduct an assessment of each use case and provide recommendations that can help define that high impact. And again, all part of your already own it benefits, and provide those strategic recommendations for evaluation. And we can talk through how you would experiment on that, how you would deploy it. We can help deploy it if necessary, but that's not the purpose of this. It's to help define that process and help you get the most out of those use cases. Just to walk through our experimentation methodology and what that looks like, it's really around taking that use case, helping you deploy that workspace enablement, understanding what the data curation and the prompt engineering looks like, and the model inferencing and data cleansing process for those use cases. So run through AI workshops, splitting the data for training and testing. And really, this is a repeatable model that you can then take for your other use cases, but it helps you get through that first one within that environment. So the reason why we are big on AI experimentation, because it builds confidence. From an Azure environment, as you're looking to deploy those services, you're wondering about the security and privacy. Will sensitive data be exposed? You may have a small or no Azure footprint in Azure, and understanding, well, what are these services? How much are they going to cost if I run this process? What's that impact? And so we'll help understand and do that data curation and protection work up front, the Azure AI workspace enablement. So just those services that are needed and help you grow into your AI capabilities. Making sure we define the accuracy of the output. How do I organize it? Can I change the model or the data? Is it working? And again, we help drive in support of that. And then interpretability and explainability. I may have concerns that the data is misinterpreted. How do I validate the results and making sure we're not impairing our scrutiny and decision making on that data? So those are the things that we can help in terms of giving you those building blocks and that methodology, so you can continue into your journey, or until within that process. Within that AI envisioning workshop, again, just to kind of show what that process looks like as part of your already own it benefits. It's the concept ideation, the benefits, the data sources, the project considerations, the impact, what you're looking for from an outcomes. And this is something that we work together, and then we provide the recommendations and next steps from within that process, again, as part of your already own it benefits. So with that, happy to answer any additional questions outside of what's been in the chat. Hopefully this has provided a baseline in terms of what you, with Copilot for GCCH not being available today, what are my options? How do I make the decisions? How do I think through and get to use cases? How can I leverage Azure and provide some type of generative AI solution to my end users today to help them filter through some of the data that may be available? And then, if necessary, how to build use cases in a roadmap methodology. So Keith or Karsten, if there's any other comments.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Karsten. All right. Feel free to come off mute. We plan some time at the end to take questions, or we got some experts. So if there's other questions you have related to, please feel free to come off mute or put your question in the chat.
I have a question. This is Rose. My question is, during the demo, what open GPT chat version did you use? And to tie into that question, if you have this training, which one of those chat GPTs will you use for training as well?
Oh, okay. This particular demo was built on GPT 3.5. I'm not sure I caught the last part of your question. If you want to repeat that.
Which one of those ChatGPT versions will you use for training?
I'm actually not sure. One
So
colleague of
yeah,
mine that was do that. Yeah.
yeah, Carson, I can help with that.
Mm.
Honestly, you would probably start with 3.5 if it's text. If you're looking to leverage images or other videos or so on, you may go to a higher one. But for initially, it from a starting out, 3.5 is usually the one that recommended until you can grow into some of the higher, more sophisticated models. It just depends where you're at in the use case, but most times we start out in 3.5. Did that help answer the question?
Yes, and I understand that you also said that we currently have GCC High. We currently have Azure OpenAI. Microsoft told us it wouldn't be available to us until like the middle of this year, 2025.
Yeah, I can take that one. So the difference being in GCC High, there's M365 Copilot, which at the very start of the presentation we talked about that. So that's the Copilot app that lives in Teams and Outlook and Word, etc. So if you have an Azure government solution or tenant as part of your GCC High deployment, and many do, this would be built in that platform, and everything we showed today is available in Azure Gov, which you could use in connection with your GCC High environment.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Great questions.
Just to add to that, I listed the models available in commercial Azure. And the second I paste in here is the base models available in my government platform. So you see there is government is gonna be a little bit behind the commercial version here.
Yep. There's always a little delay between what's being made available in commercial versus government. But for most of the things that we've talked to and the other customers we've worked with already, the models in Azure Government today suffice for the needs that most folks have. I think I saw another hand up. Was there another question?
Well, I didn't raise my hand, but I'm off mute here. And I was looking at this, and this is actually something that I'm sorry. This is Jesse with the town of Erie. We're actually just starting our AI implementation process here within the town, and I'm conducting a staff survey at this point. And what I'm finding is that people are using ChatGPT and other AI-based models to analyze data that they get from vendors, contractors, things like that. I guess this might be a little bit more of an advanced question, but is it possible to build out a chat bot that stays internal that can take a brand new emailed PDF, let's say, and be able to help analyze the data on that new document? Or does it have to be housed within our, let's say, SharePoint area? Does that make sense?
So this is Jason. So in that scenario, if you were looking to build a bot interface that could interpret that PDF file, you would need a mechanism for that for today, right? Just in Azure, for that PDF to be located inside either an Azure storage blob or somewhere within Azure to be able to do to have it available to the chatbot. Right, because I don't think you could make it available inside of SharePoint because the bot wouldn't be able to interact with it. It would have to be put into a location that the chatbot, if you're going to leverage something like that for it to be made available. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use the chat OpenAI services. You'd have to use something like Q&A Maker or some of the other bot framework pieces to be able to build out kind of your own chat interface or chat, kind of the brains behind the scenes.
And Jason, just to jump off of what you just said, hi everybody, this is Tim Lynch. In building out this private GPT for your use case, one of the decisions to make is, do you allow your users to add files where you would have the file attachment? So in the example that you just gave, that answer would be yes. We would want to enable file upload, file attachment into the chat. So that would allow you to take a PDF of whatever it is you're looking at and then use that in the context of the prompt. That's one of the decisions going through tailoring this to your solutions that you would make is, do we want to enable file upload in chat or not?
That's amazing, and I appreciate it, because what we're trying to do is our external users, our staff are using these open source AI platforms to help with their job, which I totally understand why, but we are trying to mitigate the risk of PII getting out there and being used for machine learning algorithms and stuff like that. We would like to keep everything as obviously as internal as we possibly can, but I know that one of the pushbacks that I'm going to get is, hey, well, this is all fine and good, but I can't use it to analyze the data that's in this 650-page development plan. So if that's possible, then that's awesome. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep, that's absolutely there, and it does help to kind of win the users over, because Azure is so powerful. And as we had talked about in the previous question with Karsten sharing the models, your average user going out and using GPT, Chat GPT 4.0, that model is available, so you can have that same model experience, but in the safety and security of your Azure environment.
Well, and I think,
thank you.
well, just to add to that, go ahead. I'll
No,
answer
go
after
ahead,
that.
please.
Okay.
Please, Jason, go ahead.
We have seen there's been a number of use cases because you said it earlier around a lot of our documents have PII or other identifiable information. We actually helped the university build an AI model with the application to upload documents and then de-identify the data so it can be available. So there's another example use case around, especially if you're trying to make data available to external stakeholders or to other folks, but you want to be able to de-identify data. There is the ability to, you can create your own model to de-identify it as your next output from that. So you can have a document with the same information, but having that critical identification or other data you want to remove removed from that new document. So that's another consideration for a use case as well.
And this is Rose. What I was going to add to that too is I have my own playland at home. I put a policy on the back of Azure for OneDrive, because I can load up files from my OneDrive into the ChatGPT playground as well. So you want to make sure that is secure by those policies. And correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but that's what I've done.
Nope, that's absolutely correct. You can do that, but you also want to make sure that the policies are there, that also, as well as you're putting in, especially in the Azure Gov side with that data, that you're making sure the data is not going out to the world, the inferring data, as well as is being kept within your tenant. And so there's some things that you need to check on in there as well, but that's absolutely true. Been a great conversation. Any other questions or anecdotes from you all that may have been already going through this process? All right, Keith, you want to?
I'll take silence as I think we're done. If you do have follow-up questions, please reach out. We'd be happy to take those questions. And if you need to book a session again, reach out to the Already Own It Benefits Coordinator with Kim, introduce it at the front of the session. And thank you for investing the time with us today. We greatly enjoyed the conversation. And Jason, Karsten, thank you for your support. And we look forward to having you all on the next Cloud Office Hours in roughly 3 months from now. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.